Joining me is the panel, Liberal Senator James Paterson and Renee Valaris, National Political Editor for the Courier Mail. Renee, what does this prove, do you think?
I think what it proves is exactly what Peter Dutton said, and that is that there are activist doctors who use this legislation as a backdoor to get into Australia, because as you rightly pointed out, once they get here, especially if they're from Iran or other countries, it's very hard to send them back, especially if they injunct the government. So the other issue too is that doctors are ordering that they travel with other, and accompanying adults, even if they're adults themselves. So in a case last week, there was a woman who's 21 who doctors said needed medical attention, but the doctor said she also needed to travel with her brother and her father. So she's an adult, but the doctor's saying she needs two adults to travel with her. Now, the punchline to this is they also already have family in Australia. So it was less about medical attention and more about unifying a broader family. And I think, given that there are 6 people that have come here that security agencies said they had concerns with, and Peter Dutton could not stop them from coming here, shows there is an issue here. The bar is way too high to stop people from coming here.
James, do those statistics I gave tell the full story? I mean, obviously, the activists might say, well, some of the people we brought in had medical conditions, and of course they wouldn't go to hospital, but they had to be brought in. Is there some kind way of looking at these stats that doesn't make it look like a complete rotten rip-off?
I wish there was, Andrews, but in some way it's actually worse than what you were sharing earlier. You're right that of the 135 who've come here, 5 have refused hospitalisation, but a further 43 have refused other forms of medical treatment, such as undergoing an X-ray or having a blood test. That's a very high proportion of people who supposedly have urgent medical needs that need high-quality Australian medical system attention so quickly that they need to be flown to Australia and bypass the usual processes that the government previously had in place and rely on the word of 2 doctors to get here. Unfortunately, I think it shows exactly what Peter Dutton said, what we all hoped wouldn't be true, but that is that there are people who are taking advantage of this system. They're doing it to achieve a migration outcome, and it threatens the successful border protection policies that this government has put in place and had to fight very hard to put in place against objections of people who said it would never work, it was illegal, it was inhumane. Well, they were wrong on all 3 counts.
Let me just underline for people that probably didn't believe there is when you said that. So that's nearly 50 of the 135 people flown in for urgent medical care who either refused treatment when they got here or refused the kind of tests that would have seen how sick they really were. Whether they really were as sick as they said, refused those tests. Well, boy, oh boy, are we being made fools of. Renee, you've got the government trying to repeal this law that the Independents, Greens, Labor's forced in. Labor still defending this law. It seems to me, look, they may have right on their side and goodness on their side, I don't know. But it seems to me this is one of those issues that Labor is trapped fighting on, like global warming, border controls and negatives for Labor that make it seem like it's still bogged down after the election, unable to change direction and, move on. Yeah,
I think that's right. And there's a number of issues with that. I think Labor and a number of Labor MPs and senators are mourning their election loss. And so this is one big political therapy for them, and which policies can they hang on to with dear life, because we still won't know what policies they will take to the next election. I know it's a little bit early, but at the same time, they're fighting for things that we don't even know will be their policy in 2 months' time. And I also think there is a bit of ego involved here, and that is there is one senator in particular who is making it her mission to raise her profile by attacking the Home Affairs Minister.
And can I have one guess? That's all I'll need. That is all I'll need. Christina Keneally, yeah.
She's, I don't understand Labor politicians. Whenever they're talking about votes, they are losing. They're never winning. And I still don't understand after all these years, for the past 10, 15 years, why they still don't understand this. Peter Dutton is a very effective minister, yet you get cohorts of people who think they're going to be able to get Peter Dutton in a way because, for myriad reasons I can't understand. But, I mean, he is, of some of the politicians in here, he's across his brief. He's principled, and he does. He speaks for the people who vote for him. And, you know, in this business, that's very important.
In Labor's defence, I'm going to say this, that I sort of feel like Conservatives felt under Malcolm Turnbull, that there were some issues that is worth going to the mats for, even if you're going to lose, because they were fundamental to your values. But I have to say, if some of these issues are fundamental to Labor values, then Labor really needs, you know, it's got rocks in its head. James, this is not all sweet sailing on your side. The Nationals Deputy Leader, Bridget McKenzie, she's under fire from some of her Nationals colleagues for not listening to them, for being hard to get in touch with, for being absent from the media, for doing deals with Pauline Hanson on drought relief rather than deals with them. Now, Nationals Minister Darren Chester today told them to cool it. Here he is.
I'd say to my colleagues, continue to work with the Minister, continue to work with the leadership team on policies that make a difference for regional Australians.
James Paterson, how serious is this?
Happily, Andrew, I don't have much insight to share with you or your viewers tonight, not being a member of the National Party room, being a Liberal, and unlike some of my colleagues in years gone past, actually respecting our coalition partner and declining to comment on their leadership issues, if there are any, I don't know. All I can say is that in my dealings with Bridget McKenzie, I've found her to be a very effective and valued colleague, and I haven't experienced myself any of the issues that have been alluded to in the media today.
Renee Valaris, could her National colleagues be as generous in that assessment as James Paterson just was?
Well, no, I don't think so. And the history of this is this. It's been boiling over for a few months now. Last week in Party Room, Bridget McKenzie stood up and said to them all, "I cannot bring forward a code of conduct into the dairy industry any further than April." 2 days later, she wrote a letter to Pauline Hanson saying, "I'll bring it forward to December." So obviously, a number of Nats, especially those who have dairy farms in their seats, went spare. The Nats' argument is when they go into the electorates, and a number of those electorates are under threat by One Nation candidates and voters, their argument to them is, look, well, Pauline can't deliver for you. She's not in the government. She can't deliver anything. But it's another example of Pauline actually getting outcomes. And so it takes away one of their, you know, their strident arguments why people shouldn't vote for One Nation. Now, the other issue too is that people repeatedly keep talking about how they can't get meetings with Bridget, or she gets their staff to ring them instead of ringing them herself. Now, that's probably not great stakeholder management. It's only a party of 21. It's not like she has to ring 150 people. I mean, she needs to keep the Nats generally, you know, happy. And at a time when agriculture is such a big issue, when drought is such a big issue, this is not great optics for a government that needs to be putting farmers and people in drought communities front and centre.
Renee, you make a really good point there. And James, this is the thing that puzzles me a bit. Normally, when there's some sort of natural disasters, politicians thrive because it's pretty simple to know, you know, you've got a need, you've got some money, fix it, do your press conference, you look like you're helping. Somehow, that doesn't seem to be working as smoothly for the government as it should. You had the Prime Minister having that Barney with Alan Jones, you've had changes in how the drought relief is done, you've had all that kind of stuff, and now you've got the Nationals in revolt, or a number of them in revolt with the Deputy Nationals leader on drought relief. How can you make drought relief a negative?
Well, Andrew, your domain is political analysis, it's not mine, but all I can say is on the policy merits, this government is doing a lot. More than $7 billion worth of commitment to addressing the drought. We take this issue very seriously and it's very front of mind. Just in Senate estimates today, Matthias Cormann was saying that going forward, it's the #1 call on the budget. It is our first and most urgent financial priority going forward. So for any of your viewers out there, they can rest assured that no expense is being spared in addressing the very serious concerns that a lot of Australians have about the drought.
Look, I don't doubt that. I'm just saying, I'm not doubting that your will is there. I'm not doubting that you want to spend money on it. I'm not doubting that the Prime Minister is very concerned about it. What I am saying is, in terms of public relations, this is not working as smoothly as it should for you.
My sense, Andrew, is that ironically, the people who are sceptical about what the government is doing in this area are not people who live in rural and regional Australia, it's people who live in the cities. They're the ones who are less certain about the government's efforts to address these things. They're not hearing about it every day. But the feedback that I get from my colleagues and from my constituents is that those who are in the regions are seeing on the ground the support coming through, and they're very appreciative of it. But you're right, we have a communications task to explain to all those people in the city who have genuine, heartfelt concern for their brothers and sisters in the country that we are helping them as we should be.
Is that how you see it, Renee?
Well, no, I see it as a broader issue for the government. It might seem like a good idea for Scott Morrison and Treasurer Josh Frydenberg to have an anaemic Nationals leader because it's easier when you don't have someone banging their fist on the table from another, a junior coalition saying, I want this for the bush. But a strong national party is a strong coalition, because you need your people to go out and fight for their issues when Parliament rises. We need people, we need those senators and MPs going out and speaking to their constituency. And the other issue too is that, and James is right, this has now become an issue for the burbs. Most people live in the suburbs and they're wanting to know, what are you doing for the farmers? And at some point, if this drought doesn't break, people in the cities will find it they'll see the impacts of the drought. It'll come at the checkout. They'll pay more for their fruit and vegetables, and they'll pay more for their meat. And so people are rightly saying right now, well, hang on, you've just announced some money for a space program for South Australia, but all they heard was NASA. And the talkback radio is,
I think that's right.
The farmers. Why didn't you give that money to the farmers?
I think that's going to become an issue. It might be a PR issue only rather than a delivery one, but it is an issue. Renee Villaris and James Paterson, thank you so much to you both.